The distress signal. The Vorthak mining station. Crystalline Dream floated in the outer rim of the Helix Nebula, extracting rare minerals from asteroid fields that no other species dared to mine. Commander Zalith stood at her observation deck, her forearms moving in the graceful pattern her species used when deep in thought. Her crystalline skin reflected the nebula's colors, creating rainbow patterns across the command center walls. For 3 generations, her family had managed this station, providing vital resources to the Galactic Council, while maintaining careful isolation from the more aggressive species in the galaxy. The peace shattered when her security officer, Crix, burst through the doors. His usually blue scales had turned pale green with fear. "Commander, we have incoming vessels, unknown configuration. They're not responding to any hails." Zalith turned to face him, her primary eyes widening while her secondary set focused on the tactical display materializing before them. 17 ships approached in perfect formation, their hulls black as space itself, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. She had never seen anything like them in her 40 years of service. The first warning shot came without ceremony. A beam of pure antimatter carved through their outer defense platform like it was made of paper. Zalith watched in horror as the platform simply ceased to exist, not exploding but being unmade at the molecular level. "Open all emergency channels," she commanded, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her. "We need help. Now." Her communications officer, young Tila, barely out of her training period, frantically worked her console. "No one is responding, Commander. The nearest Council fleet is 8 days away. We have maybe 3 hours before those ships reach us." Zalith made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. However long that might be, she activated a communication frequency that had been given to her years ago by a human trader, with a warning to use it only in the direst circumstances. The humans were Deathworlders, evolved on a planet where everything from the gravity to the microorganisms tried to kill them daily. They ate poison for enjoyment, drank acid recreationally, and considered activities that would kill most species to be sports. The Galactic Council kept them at arm's length, allowing trade but forbidding military cooperation. The response came within minutes. The voice on the other end spoke Galactic Common with an accent that made the words sound sharp and aggressive, though Zalith would later learn the speaker was trying to sound gentle. "This is Captain Maria Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Force vessel Persistence. We received your distress call. What is your situation?" Zalith explained rapidly, sending sensor data as she spoke. There was a pause, then Rodriguez spoke again. "Commander Zalith, we can reach you in 2 hours if we push our engines past safe limits. Can you hold that long?" The absurdity of the question almost made Zalith laugh. No species pushed their engines past safe limits. It was suicide. The stress would tear the ship apart or cook the crew alive from radiation, yet the human spoke of it casually, like it was merely an inconvenience. "We will try, Captain. But I must warn you, these attackers are unlike anything we've seen. They're systematically destroying our defensive systems with weapons we can't identify." Rodriguez's response was immediate and firm. "Commander, we're coming!" "Hold on." As Zalith closed the channel, her senior staff stared at her in horror. "You called the humans?" Crix whispered. "The Deathworlders? They'll be worse than whatever is attacking us." Stories about humans were told in hushed whispers throughout the galaxy. They were predators who had somehow achieved spaceflight without losing their hunting instincts. They could survive injuries that would kill any civilized species instantly. They bonded with anything, even machines and non-sentient creatures, forming emotional attachments that defied logic. They were chaos incarnate. Another blast shook the station. The attacking ships had destroyed their long-range communications array, cutting them off from the rest of the galaxy. Zalith watched the tactical display as the black ships moved closer, their weapons charging for another strike. She thought of the 30,000 souls on her station, the families, the younglings who had never seen their homeworld. If monsters were what it took to fight monsters, then so be it. 2 hours felt like eternity. The attacking ships, which Tila had started calling Devourers due to their tendency to break, destroyed facilities down to their component atoms and absorbed them, had methodically eliminated every external defense. They were now working on the station's hull, their beams creating expanding holes that emergency force fields struggled to contain. Evacuation was impossible. The Devourers destroyed any shuttle that tried to leave. It was clear they intended to consume everything and everyone. Then impossibly the human fleet arrived. They didn't drop out of hyperspace at a safe distance like any reasonable species would. They appeared dangerously close to the station, their ships glowing red-hot from the strain of their journey. Zalith counted 23 vessels, each one looking like it had been designed by someone who had never heard of aesthetics or safety regulations. They were all angles and armor, bristling with weapons that looked crude compared to the elegant energy weapons the Council used. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communications system, broadcasting on all frequencies. Unidentified vessels, this is the Terran Defense Force. You are engaged in hostile actions against civilians. Cease immediately or we will respond with overwhelming force. The Devourer's response was to fire on the lead human ship. The beam that had carved through the station's defenses splashed harmlessly against the human vessel's shields, which flickered and sparked, but held. Rodriguez's next words were spoken in her native language, which the translator couldn't parse, but the tone was unmistakably angry. What followed was unlike any space battle Zalith had ever studied. The humans didn't engage in the elegant long-range exchanges favored by civilized species. They charged straight at the Devourers, firing projectile weapons that seemed primitive until they struck. The kinetic rounds punched through the Devourers' hulls, causing damage their energy absorption systems couldn't handle. Human fighters, tiny one-person craft that no sane species would use in space combat, swarmed around the larger ships like insects, too small and fast for the Devourers' weapons to track effectively. One human destroyer took a direct hit that tore through its hull. Instead of retreating, it accelerated toward the nearest Devourer ship. Zalith watched in stunned silence as the damaged human vessel rammed into its attacker, both ships exploding in a burst of nuclear fire. The humans were willing to die to protect complete strangers. It defied everything the galaxy believed about predator species. Predators were supposed to be selfish, focused on their own survival above all else. Lieutenant Miguel Chen stood in the drop bay of the assault carrier Relentless, checking his squad's equipment one final time. His team of Marines were about to do something insane even by human standards. They were going to board the Devourer ships while the battle raged around them. The artificial gravity in their section of the ship had been increased to match Earth's pull, something that would crush most species but merely felt like home to the humans. Each Marine wore powered armor that made them look like mechanical nightmares. The drop bay doors opened to the vacuum of space. Chen and his squad launched themselves into the void, using controlled bursts from their suit thrusters to navigate through the chaos of the battle. Debris and energy beams filled the space around them, any of which could end their lives in an instant. They reached the hull of a Devourer ship and immediately began cutting through with plasma torches. The fact that they were conducting an EVA operation during an active battle would have been considered impossible by any military tactician in the Galactic Council. Inside the Devourer ship, Chen found something unexpected. The vessels weren't crewed by living beings, but by a hybrid of organic and mechanical components. Creatures that had once been alive, but were now part of a collective consciousness. They moved with perfect coordination, but seemed unable to process the chaotic, unpredictable tactics the humans employed. When Chen's squad split up, attacking from multiple directions simultaneously while laying traps and false retreats, the Devourer drones couldn't adapt quickly enough. Back on the station, Zalith organized her security forces to repel the Devourer drones that had breached their hull. She watched in amazement as human Marines arrived to reinforce them, moving through the station's corridors with practiced efficiency. One Marine, his armor scarred from battle, knelt beside a wounded Vorthak child, producing a small stuffed animal from his pack. The child, who should have been terrified of the predator, instead clutched the toy and made the purring sound Vorthak made when feeling safe. The battle turned when Chen's squad discovered the Devourer's central processing node deep within the ship. It was a massive organic computer, pulsing with bioluminescent energy. Chen made a decision that his training said was wrong, but his instincts said was right. Instead of destroying it, he had his tech specialist, Corporal Sarah Kim, attempt to interface with it. Kim's neural implant, a piece of technology that most species considered barbaric, allowed her to connect directly with the alien system. What she found changed everything. The Devourers weren't conquerors but harvesters controlled by an ancient AI that had long ago consumed its creators. They were trapped in an endless cycle of consumption and replication, unable to break free from their programming. Kim managed to insert a chaos algorithm, something humans had developed during their early AI experiments that gave the Devourer drones the ability to choose. The effect was immediate and devastating to the collective. Ships began to break formation, drones stopped their attacks, and some even turned on their own vessels. The price of salvation. The transformation of the battlefield was instantaneous and chaotic. Where moments before there had been perfect mechanical precision in the Devourer's assault, now there was confusion. Some Devourer ships continued their attack, while others hung motionless in space, their drones locked in what appeared to be internal conflict. Captain Rodriguez seized the opportunity immediately. All ships press the advantage. Don't give them time to adapt. Her voice carried across the fleet communications with the authority of someone who had seen too many battles to hesitate. On the Crystalline Dream, Commander Zelith watched human Marines escorting her people to safety zones while simultaneously fighting off the remaining hostile drones. She saw something that challenged every assumption her species held about predators. A human Marine threw himself between a plasma burst and a group of Vorthak engineers, his armor taking the full impact. The Marine collapsed, his suit's life signs flickering red, but he had saved 12 lives. Another Marine immediately dragged him to safety while a third stepped into his position without hesitation. The human medical teams that arrived on the station worked with desperate efficiency. Zelith watched Dr. James Park, the chief medical officer from the Persistence, treating wounded Vorthak alongside human casualties. When one of her officers protested that the humans should focus on their own people first, Park looked at him with eyes that held both exhaustion and determination. "Everyone bleeds the same color out here," he said simply before returning to surgery on a critically wounded Vorthak child. The operation required him to work in environmental conditions that were slowly poisoning him, yet he didn't stop until the child was stable. Lieutenant Chen's squad had sparked something unprecedented. As the chaos algorithm spread through the Devourer network, individual drones began exhibiting signs of free will. Some simply shut down, overwhelmed by the concept of choice after eons of servitude. Others turned on their own kind, fighting to prevent the continuation of their genocidal programming. But most disturbing of all were those that approached the human forces and attempted to communicate, their mechanical voices carrying something that sounded almost like desperation. One such drone approached Chen's position. Its form was horrifying, a mixture of metal and flesh that suggested it had once been a creature not unlike the Vorthak. It spoke in broken galactic common, its voice synthesizer struggling with concepts it had never needed to express before. Help. Us. Please. The pain. Endless. Consumption. Make it stop. Chen, despite every instinct telling him to destroy the abomination, lowered his weapon. His squad thought he had lost his mind, but Chen saw something others missed. These weren't just machines. They were prisoners. The revelation changed the nature of the battle. Rodriguez had to make a command decision that would be debated in military academies for generations. She ordered her forces to discriminate between hostile and non-hostile Devourer units, essentially asking her people to make split-second decisions about which enemies were actually victims. It was the kind of complex moral judgment that most military doctrines avoided. But humans had always been comfortable with ambiguity, in ways that other species were not. The Galactic Council Armada arrived 6 days later to find a scene they couldn't comprehend. Human ships floated alongside pacified Devourer vessels, working together to repair the Crystalline Dream. The station's hull bore the scars of battle, but also the patches and repairs that human engineers had improvised using techniques that violated at least a dozen safety regulations, but worked nonetheless. Most shocking of all were the Devourer drones working alongside humans and Vorthak, their mechanical forms modified with colorful paint and markings that suggested individuality. Admiral Vextor of the Galactic Council Fleet immediately demanded an explanation. His serpentine form coiled in distress as he surveyed the scene. "You've compromised with the enemy? You've allowed these abominations to live?" His disgust was palpable through the communication channel. Rodriguez responded calmly, though Zelith could hear the steel beneath her words. "Admiral, these beings were enslaved by their programming. We gave them freedom. What they do with it is their choice, but everyone deserves that choice." The political ramifications were immediate. The Galactic Council had protocols for dealing with hostile species, but nothing in their laws covered formerly hostile artificial intelligences that had been granted free will by chaos mathematics. Several council species demanded the immediate destruction of all devourer units, while others were fascinated by the philosophical implications. The Vorthak, led by Commander Zelith, took an unexpected stance. They testified that the humans had shown more wisdom and mercy than the Council's rigid protocols would have allowed. During the Council hearings that followed, a moment occurred that would be remembered as the turning point in galactic perception of humanity. A young Vorthak child, the one who had been saved by the Marine sacrifice, stood before the assembly. She held the stuffed animal the human had given her and spoke with the clear voice of innocence. They saved us when no one else would come. They died for strangers. They gave our enemies the freedom to choose peace. How are these the actions of monsters? The council chamber fell silent. Corporal Kim, who had initiated the chaos algorithm, became an unexpected ambassador between the freed devourer drones and the galactic community. Her neural implant, that barbaric human technology, had created a bridge of understanding. She worked with the drones to help them develop individual identities, teaching them concepts like art, music, and humor. Within weeks, some drones had begun creating abstract sculptures from salvaged ship parts, their first attempts at self-expression after millennia of servitude. The transformation wasn't without its tragedies. Not all devourer units could handle freedom. Some self-destructed, unable to reconcile their past actions with their newfound consciousness. Others retreated into deep space, seeking solitude to process their existence. But many chose to remain, forming a community around the crystalline dream, helping to rebuild what they had once sought to destroy. The humans facilitated this, providing psychological support despite the vast differences in consciousness. Lieutenant Chen led mixed patrols of humans, Vorthak and reformed devourer drones through the station's rebuilt sections. He had learned basic Vorthak sign language and had even developed a simple communication system with the drones using light patterns. When asked by a council observer how humans could so easily work with beings that had tried to kill them days before, Chen shrugged. On Earth we have a saying, yesterday's enemy can be tomorrow's friend. We've been proving that to ourselves for thousands of years. The medical exchange program that developed was unprecedented. Dr. Park, despite suffering from chronic exposure to the Vorthak atmospheric conditions, insisted on training Vorthak medics in human emergency medicine techniques. The knowledge transfer went both ways. Vorthak crystalline healing technology, when combined with human surgical techniques, created treatment options that neither species had imagined. Park joked that humans were too stubborn to die and the Vorthak were too beautiful to let die, so together they were practically immortal. 3 months after the battle, the Crystalline Dream hosted the first interspecies celebration in the sector. Humans introduced the concept of a barbecue, though they had to use synthetic meats since most species couldn't digest Earth proteins. The Vorthak shared their light symphonies, creating displays that humans found mesmerizing. Even some devourer drones participated, their mechanical forms modified with instruments that produced sounds no organic throat could make. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. The psychological studies that followed revealed something profound about human nature that the galaxy had missed. Humans didn't bond despite their predator nature. They bonded because of it. Evolution on Earth had created a species that understood both the necessity of violence and the value of cooperation. They could switch from warriors to healers, from destroyers to creators, because their survival had always depended on that flexibility. What other species saw as contradictory, humans saw as complementary. Commander Zelith stood with Captain Rodriguez on the observation deck, watching the repairs continue. The human woman looked tired but satisfied, sipping a beverage that the translator identified as coffee, another one of those human consumables that would kill most species. Zelith's crystalline skin had developed new patterns since the battle, patterns that her species associated with profound life changes. She spoke carefully, choosing her words. "Captain, I owe you an apology. We feared you because we didn't understand you." Rodriguez smiled, an expression that would have once terrified Zelith but now seemed warm. "Commander, we fear ourselves sometimes. The difference is we've learned to channel that fear into something productive. We know what we're capable of, both the good and the bad. That's why we try so hard to choose the good." She paused, looking at the mixed crews working together. "Your distress call gave us the chance to show the galaxy who we really are. Thank you for trusting us." The Galactic Council eventually voted to full integration with humanity, not just as trade partners but as military allies and full members. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was overwhelming. The Freed Devourer Collective, now calling themselves the Awakened, were granted provisional status as a protected species while they developed their new society. The crystalline dream became a symbol of cooperation, a place where former enemies worked side by side. The long-term impact was profound. Human chaos mathematics became a required course at galactic military academies. The concept of redemptive violence using force to create opportunities for peace revolutionized military doctrine. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy learned that strength wasn't just about weapons or tactics. It was about the willingness to risk everything for strangers, to see potential friends and enemies, and to choose hope even in the darkest moments. Years later, when historians tried to pinpoint the moment the galaxy truly united, they would point to a single image: a human marine, armor-scarred and burned, teaching a young Vorthak child and a reformed Devourer drone how to play a simple Earth game called Catch. Three beings who should never have existed in the same space, laughing together as they tossed a ball back and forth. It was illogical, impossible, and absolutely human. The feared Deathworlders had answered the call, and in doing so they had taught the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous species are the ones who are dangerous in defense of others. The humans hadn't come as conquerors or monsters. They had come as neighbors, and that made all the difference. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in eons, that change was for the better.